Thomas, great to have you back with us today, mate. We are talking about your latest column, Where Social Investment Fears to Tread. Now, I know down in Wellington, the bureaucrats have their own sort of language that they have to translate for the rest of us. Words like proportionate universalism and things like that. So social investment is one of those words. Translate that for us. Tell us, what is social investment in everyday speak?
Yeah, for sure. So social investment is, I guess, the ideological framework that National would like to bring into government public policy. So Nicola Willis specifically is a big champion of it. So it goes back to Bill English's time in government, and he was looking for a way of kind of quantifying or evaluating how government spending could be more efficient, or how do you get value for your money. And so how social investment tends to think about that is, what money can we spend now to save money in the future? So the two kind of really easy examples to go for are, if we spend money on insulating houses in poorer communities, we will spend less money on giving healthcare to people with respiratory illnesses. Or if you rehabilitate prisoners and so that they become integrated back into society, you don't have to pay to incarcerate them in the future if they commit crimes. So because we collect a lot of data on people these days through our integrated data infrastructure, you can get a really good idea about what interventions actually save money over the long term, so you can spend government money more efficiently.
So you're trying to target your interventions for not only for the good of the person you're intervening in, but I guess trying to help the economy over the long term. So it's kind of an economic model. Is that, or is it trying to blend social, the name social investment, but social services with wise spending? Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah, and so perhaps less the economy as a whole, but certainly the government finances. And so it's, an attempt to spend money more efficiently, because otherwise all you're really left with is, don't worry, we increased the healthcare budget by $1 billion. And it doesn't really tell you, okay, but how did that affect people's outcomes? And so kind of social investment is quite a technical sounding thing, and they do some interesting stuff with data. But actually the really core ideas are pretty straightforward and in some ways obvious. Early interventions are better than late ones. Your fence at the top of the cliff, not the ambulance at the bottom. The most marginalized in society do end up consuming most of the Crown spending, quite understandably. And so if you can help them, you actually generate a lot of benefits. So really targeting those who are most marginalized, and not simply people who are working class, but more or less comfortable. And then this kind of idea of continual assessment. We don't know whether something works until we can analyze it. And so if we do these things, social investment argues that we can get better public services for everyone, and then kind of the country will thrive.
So that's the marketing, I guess, or the translation is, call me cynical, but, a lot of politics these days seems to be empty promises. That's, I guess, the idea of politics, going back as long as we've been in politics, as long as we've had politics. But it seems to be a lot of empty promises, a lot of like big container words, I want to say. So like you mentioned kindness in the column. That's a big container word that kind of can be massaged to mean whatever someone wants it to mean. Oh, we're doing this because it's fulfilling kindness, when actual fact it's maybe not kind to some people, but kind to others. Is this one of those terms, or does it actually have some substance behind it? Does it have some kind of bite to it?
Well, that's the kind of the question of the column. And so you mentioned kindness, Jacinda Ardern's brand. Kindness was sort of the marketing language, but the ideology underneath it was proportionate universalism. And so you can kind of, you have to have these brands for the public, that's fine, but then you have to see, is there something underneath it? And so for National, and particularly for Christopher Luxon, right, it's that corporate language, it's delivery, it's KPIs and all of that. And so the question I ask in the column is social investment a brand, or is there ideological substance to it? And so I propose there's a test case for this.
Yeah.
And the test case is superannuation.
Okay, you've chosen the untouchable thing, right? The superannuation, which I suppose if your test case is going to succeed, it should go after the most difficult thing. So tell us a little bit about how you might apply social investment to super.
Yeah, so the reason I chose superannuation is because it's an incredibly large amount of government spending. And everyone knows that, but I don't think we really process it all the time. So superannuation costs us $23.2 billion every year. So $23.2 thousand million every year. It is 16% of the core Crown budget. So it's quite a large amount of spending, and it's obviously going to get larger. And when you think about what superannuation is, it's the exact opposite of how social investment tends to think about interventions. Social investment, earlier is better than late. Superannuation is a very late program. Social investment, targeted, is better than just generalized scattershot of money. Superannuation is universal. And also targeted, those over the age of 65 have the lowest rates of material deprivation of any demographic in the country. So we're not only giving it universally, we're giving it to a demographic as a whole who are not that hard done by. And there's no real assessment about how important this is and, do we tweak it? And so
it was kind of implemented and then just left.
Yeah.
In a way. And then we don't talk about it. We don't want to raise the super age. We don't want to lower the payments or kind of do any of that because it's seen in some ways as just being a good thing. And
that's actually fair enough if you're ideologically committed to universal superannuation is the right thing to do. We want a universal system. That's fine. That can be a position someone holds. But if you believe in social investment and that we want to target and we're looking for efficiency,
they're not the same.
They're not the same thing. You can kind of pick one or the other, but you can't have both. And so that's really what I'm trying to prod at in the column.
Okay, so break it down for us then a little bit in terms of how you might rejig the super system. What are some of the things you might do?
Yeah, well, I guess to start with the things I don't think we can do. And so sometimes people will observe that the current superannuation funding is perhaps not sustainable. Oh, well, if we raise the retirement age, well, then we're giving it to fewer people and that'll be how we achieve sustainability.
Save some money in that way.
And that would save money, but it kind of misses a really key point. People like you and I who work in offices, at desks or with microphones, we can work well into our 60s. We could do our current jobs. If you're working, as a labourer, you just can't keep going indefinitely. And so
someone who's building roads can't do it in their 70s.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not simply that we can just reduce the amount that super pays people who receive it. If you are paying rent, i.e. you don't own your own home and haven't, for whatever reason, been able to save a healthy retirement fund, superannuation isn't that generous. If you do own your own home, it's quite nice. But for many people, they're not rolling in money if they're on super, so you can't just cut it. The key problem with superannuation as it stands is pretty straightforward. We give a tremendous amount of money to people who don't need it. we bonus money. We subsidize some very privileged people.
Yeah. So how would we target that then? If we were not gonna just get rid of it, if we weren't gonna raise the age, how might we be a bit more social investment-y about it?
Yeah, so I guess the simple way to do it is some form of means testing, right? So looking for what are people's asset bases. So you might want to exclude the family home. I don't think it's something that you need to target incredibly harshly, but just to think about the scale of how much money we spend on super, $23.2 billion. If we means tested, the top quarter of the wealthiest people in this country out of superannuation. That is like $6 billion, just a shade under.
Wow.
When you think about the scale of, the government has been undertaking this program of cuts. They say that government spending is bloated and they've been looking for, ways to save money. They want to, cut all these different departments by 5 or 6%. You could do that simply by means testing the wealthiest out of superannuation and pay for all these other cuts they're wanting to do overnight. Yeah. One change.
Yeah.
It's a staggering amount of money.
And that could be invested elsewhere in the budget, couldn't it? So it's
so that's the thing is that I think means testing superannuation and the social investment approach doesn't mean you have to cut spending overall. It's not simply a tool for people who want a smaller government. And one good example for the scale of this is even if you're wanting to spend money on the elderly, those later in life, palliative care in this country, palliative care for those who are dying, right? People, hospices, all of that.
Yeah.
The total kind of economy of that, 2021 numbers, is about $175 million.
Wow.
So
not even a quarter of 1 billion.
Not even a quarter of $1 billion. And only half of that is funded by government, about 88 million. Hospice run those charity shops, not just because
for
it's
a
fun.
reason. Yeah.
They need the money.
Yeah.
And we could fund that very easily by means testing superannuation. Yeah. Money we spend on super means we can't spend it on palliative care for those who really need it.
Yeah. Wow, Thomas, there's a lot to think about. And here's hoping that social investment is not just a marketing device or something to sell or buy votes, but that it's actually something with a bit of substance, and that we'll hopefully see some change going forward. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me. If ideological politics is not dead, it has certainly gone into hibernation. What remains is simply branding. Jacinda Ardern's kindness has been replaced by Luxon's corporate deliverology, both brands flexible enough to serve whatever policies are electorally beneficial. But these brands are for the public. Technocrats and the political class have an esoteric language of their own. Kindness was just the populist face of proportionate universalism. Now we have social investment, the serious face of the politics of delivery. Social investment, despite its technical branding, is pretty straightforward. Finance Minister Nicola Willis champions it as being about using data, evidence, and modern analytics to invest in earlier and better intervention that can effectively break cycles of disadvantage, dependence, and despair. The basic intuitions of social investment are simple. Early interventions are better than late ones. Helping the most acutely deprived provides the largest amount of benefit. Continual assessment is crucial to effective welfare. By these measures, superannuation is the exact opposite of a good program. A late intervention, given universally to those with the lowest rates of material deprivation, with no ongoing evaluation of its worth. And it's not cheap. Super costs 16% of the core Crown budget, $23.2 billion annually, almost as much as all other welfare programs combined. When we spent an entire news cycle arguing about something as trivial as reinstating a $5 co-payment on prescriptions, the Prime Minister stated bluntly, "I think it's really unfair. It's money that's wasted on being spent on someone like me, for example, who can afford to pay." The projected revenue generated by bringing back co-payments, $23.2 million a year, is exactly 1/1000th of the cost of superannuation. NZ Super spends that much by lunchtime, every single day. This is not sustainable. The outgoing Treasury Chief pointed this out in her exit interview last week. But we've all known it for some time. Proposals to raise the retirement age ignore the fact that those not privileged enough to earn money from a laptop can't keep working indefinitely. Nor is the actual superannuation payment especially generous for those who don't own their own home. The core problem with superannuation is that we give an extraordinary amount of money to people who do not need it and would not face hardship were it removed. The government wants to exercise spending restraint. Fair enough. But there's no point saving pennies while wasting pounds. Social investment promises a coherent framework for the centre-right welfare state. But to date, the government has expressed no desire to apply it to superannuation. If the single largest welfare program in the country is excluded from this sort of analysis, what's the point? Without the conviction to pursue it consistently and relentlessly, it becomes a marketing scheme. If social investment has nothing to say about superannuation, it has nothing to say at all.